everybody wants to push that innovation further, and that is also creating a lot of interesting opportunities. Robot technician will be as common as plumber or electrician in your house. It's the same.
I agree. And I think one of the things that draws an interesting parallel here, if we look back at production and we look back historically over the last 100 years, we had people, usually men, who were in these facilities, and they were the engineers or the repair guys or the guys who worked on the machines. And they were the ones who were in charge of maintaining this equipment and making sure that it worked. So I think that this is just the next evolution of that. Hello, and welcome to Speaking of Supply Chain, where we explore trends, current events, and innovations impacting the logistics and supply chain industries. I'm your host, Ellen Wood. Labor shortages, high turnover, and safety risks continue to challenge warehouses, with some facilities seeing annual turnover rates above 40%. At the same time, demand for faster, more reliable fulfillment has never been greater. I'm joined today by Dr. Jan Zizka to explore how Brightpick is using robotics and AI not just to boost efficiency, but to create safer, more sustainable, and more engaging workplaces for the people who keep supply chains moving. Welcome, Jan.
Thank you.
It's great to have you here today. Before we get started, let's jump into our icebreaker. And today's question is, as a child, what did you want to be when you grew up?
So I don't remember exactly, but I think my mother told me that when I was really young, I told something like I was very impressed by, trash man and like I think that the mechanical car was very interesting to me or something like that. So Trashman was the very first one. Later, I think I promised to my parents that I will paint a picture and sell it for 1 million. That was kind of the second one. So it looks like the ambition was up and down.
Yeah, you know what? I can understand that. I have little boys myself, and anything with a big truck that moves big things, whether it's construction equipment or the trash truck, they are very excited about that. So I feel like that seems pretty reasonable for all little boys. They want to drive the big trucks. Let's see. For myself, when I was really little, I mean, of course, when you're very small, you have all sorts of dreams. But once I was actually thinking about realistically what I wanted to do, I wanted to be an art teacher. At the elementary or primary school level, I wanted to be an art teacher, and I started pursuing that career, and then realized very quickly that I don't have the patience to be a teacher. I love art and I love kids. I love my kids. I love doing art, but trying to turn it into a profession was just not going to work for me. So I had to abandon that fairly early. And then I thought I might be a marine biologist for a while. But yeah, I don't know why that kind of fell by the wayside. I think life just, started taking me in a different direction, and I really enjoyed some of the other things I was doing. So I just kind of dropped that one. There wasn't any, big dramatic thing like there was with trying to be an art teacher. But yeah, I've explored a lot of different careers over the time that I've been working. But no, I think that what we're interested in as small children gives a lot of insight into where our mind is looking. So let's see if we can get into some of those technical aspects of big trucks that appealed to you so early in your childhood in our discussion today, which is about robotic picking and using robots within the four walls of a facility, mostly fulfillment centers. But, there is the opportunity in just regular warehouses as opposed to giant DCs. So let's talk a little bit about some of the labor issues that are affecting warehouses today. And I know that my information is mainly about the US, but I know some of these things are universal and globally applicable. So labor shortage, I was talking about it just a minute ago. And sometimes those turnover rates are as high as 40%. And it's becoming very difficult for especially US companies to employ people who want to work in a warehouse or a fulfillment center. And there are a lot of different reasons for it, and we could get into those. But I think the net of that conversation is it's not going to change. We're not going to all of a sudden get this generation of workers who want these more manual positions, who want this, it's heavy work. It's physical work. And I think as a society, we're starting to move away from some of those types of professions with the advent of some of this technology that is available. So from your perspective, is there anything else that's driving that gap other than the labor market pulling away from those more manual types of job positions?
Yep. So in general, I would compare it directly to, agriculture and industrial revolution. It's very, very similar from some viewpoint. Like, even 100 years ago, still there was a lot of people working in agriculture. Today, it's very little. And yes, people have to invent machines to kind of solve that issue to some extent. But again, solving that issue is pulling those people out of those jobs even more from some viewpoint. So I would say it is partially chicken egg, but definitely the primary driver is exactly as you told. It's just people today. In many cases, I tell that today everybody wants to be YouTuber, so that is still, kind of much more attractive job compared to, walking. I think in many cases it's, 5, even maybe 10 miles per day in many cases in manual fulfillment centers. It's not really, in principle, your boss is hunting that peak rate. There's not much fun into it. It's probably from like mentally it's pretty simple job from some viewpoint. Physically it's quite difficult. It's very repeatable, and I just feel like there's not much sunlight in those warehouses. There's, I would say, a lot of aspects, and people don't see it. In many cases, warehouses are kind of clean. It is not terrible, but it's not exactly fancy office space,
Exactly.
So I would say there's a lot of small details that simply add up, and it's simply not attractive. I think if we don't need to do that, but if we would do some kind of pool, like we would get clear results, and the result is if you open today Indeed or Glassdoor or whatever, any of these platforms, probably there's like between 50 to 100,000 open positions, and that is specifically warehouse picker. It's not warehouse worker or something. It's warehouse picker, and it's really high number, and this number is so. To some extent, we increase automation, but it's still kind of little from some viewpoint. And I remember I'm checking this number, maybe each quarter, and it's kind of the same. Of course, during the peak season is even higher, when Amazon, Walmart, and other companies are hiring even more. But it's simply a huge number of people, and as you said, like it definitely is not going to improve, and I would say it's clear it's going to be worse. It's obvious that it's going to be worse, and plus there's also different factors like. In many cases, you want to have a warehouse outside of the city. If your last mile allows that, it's outside of the city, potentially quite far from the city. Again, there is adding another argument. Like I have seen actually people really organizing a special bus tours for those workers to even get them there. So it's like a special line in principle. So and maybe as you said. For example, I can compare Asia. I don't know much, but Europe and US I can compare quite well, and I think it's almost exactly the same. The only difference I probably see, mainly in let's say Central Europe, Germany, is that there's a lot of people from more like Eastern Europe, because it's more or less free market, labor market. It's, of course, there are some limitations, but it's kind of easy, and those people usually would earn, let's say, half, maybe third of the salary in their original country. So it's kind of simple sometimes they even travel like regularly, for example, to Germany and so on. On the other side, we see that German companies, they are moving their warehouses, for example, to Czech Republic or Poland or whatever, Slovakia and so on. So it's kind of, people are trying to solve that problem, and it's partially about cost efficiency, but I would say that is in principle totally secondary. I remember very well, I have been in, I don't know, maybe 50 warehouses, and maybe warehouse number 10 I have ever seen. I remember the manager telling me that, Jan, I'm so tired. I was like, okay, what is wrong? And he's like, I'm doing interview number, I don't know, 20 today or something like that. Looks like his almost main job was, he was like a manager, of the given warehouse, and it looked like he's spending a lot of time with interviews, and he was really telling that, and it's almost waste of time because I hire someone, the chance they will show up is 50%. It was not 50, he was kidding, but
right.
I think he meant like maybe 10% they don't show up, which is still very high. If you have all that effort, maybe you see 10 people, then you select, and then the guy is not, showing up. I think it's really almost, you describe it well, that if the turnover is 40%, you kind of, replaces all the people so often. I would say, how to tell it, from big part is motivation of those managers. Of course, it's owner of the warehouse, but ultimately I think it's just very difficult for those managers.
Yeah, I think there are a number of factors that affect the volatility of that, whether it's the seasonality, where people need jobs all year round, not just when the employers need workers. And so, that's a detriment to an employee for, even signing up for that type of labor, knowing that it's temporary, or, knowing that it is that. I don't want to say that these types of facilities are uncomfortable or unpretty to work in. I mean, it's a warehouse. It is what it is. But it's honest work. It pays well for those who want to, participate in it. But, to your point, when labor is scarce in a particular area, sometimes that it ought to be a factor when companies are building their facilities. It's clearly something that they need to address in that location evaluation. However, things change over time. And if that, local community disperses and then that facility is left without labor, they're kind of in a tough situation, looking at potentially moving their entire location to where the labor is, or having to come up with a different solution. Whether the labor has left, whether the labor in the area is not interested, automation is a solution, and that's where Brightpick comes in. So I think when we start looking at some of these improvements and reducing that dependence on the manual picking, and we start bringing in some automation, does it allow them to, work alongside the automation? What does it do in terms of, safety and security or accuracy for that warehouse? Because that is a very big decision to have to come to start replacing part of your workforce with an automated solution. And this is not, some small solution. This is a major undertaking. So I know companies need to do their due diligence and understand what the costs are going to be. Where are they able to recoup some of that, in whether it's a direct cost or an indirect cost, like employee safety?
I think, for me, I have seen it in many cases. It's either our automation, different types of automation. Before I worked more for automotive, similar story from some viewpoint. And I think the major point for me is that they always keep the best people, the people who are probably longer with the company, people who had, pretty good pick rate, who was kind of active, engaged. And ultimately, I feel like, okay, that's a great news from some viewpoint. That it is nobody's really letting the best pickers. It's like it's clearly the some kind of asset they have. And they're very proud probably, and that means we are potentially improving that job for those who were engaged and who wanted to help. In that given warehouse. So from this viewpoint, I think it's pretty good in terms of all the walking distance and these. I would say it's obvious that they suddenly have to walk much less. That's kind of obvious, benefit. We always explore that, for example, when you have G2P station or you do restock of our system or any of these, you still have to be there either 4 hours with some break, or maybe even 7 hours. I'm not sure. Depends on the country and the rules. So in many cases we also explore like it has to be at least somehow ergonomic. Because still it's usually standing, not sitting. So it's usually standing. So in many cases we even kind of intentionally introduce few steps between the peaks, because I think just standing, I would hate it. So in many cases, I think doing those, 2 steps left, 2 steps right, I think in principle it's a good thing, because at least you are moving, and also I would say you are probably adjusting your posture, or how to tell it. It's kind of because otherwise you are probably leaning, in that one spot. Here you have to walk, and walking is actually very good for your, how you stand, or how to tell it. So from this viewpoint, I think there's a lot of small details that could be, of course, improved. It's not like suddenly it's, pure heaven, and, like it's still the same warehouse. It's still, the same environment and so on. Still not so much sunlight, but I think what they really appreciate is, I think, suddenly they are working with, in our case, like really cutting edge, high end robots. We also try to be, more human, let's call it. Every robot has its name, so they really like it. They call it, like, okay, Carl, whatever, James, and so on and so on. So, and plus our robots are collaborative, so they are really working in the same environment. Of course, still you have to be careful. You cannot, jump from the rack in front of the robot and similar things. But I think it's still very, safe. And from this viewpoint, it's not so visible. But again, that was another manager telling me once that they have some kind of injury almost every day. And I was like, okay, what is happening? It's just people walking, what is wrong? And he's like, okay, but they are pulling or pushing, big rack, it could be even 50 kilograms, maybe even more. So it cannot stop so quickly. And it's mainly, traffic jam. Like, it's people suddenly in one spot, someone is behind the corner, just jumping in front of your cart, you are hitting him with the cart, or just maybe falling. It was not like, mortal, some crazy things. It was really simple things. But he told that, yes, we have small injuries almost every day. Yeah. And I was a little surprised. And yes, it's suddenly much easier with robots, because kind of the traffic jam is mostly between the robots. Suddenly, there's much less humans, and they are I would say much better organized. They are either in the goods to person station, or close to restock station, or somewhere. So it's suddenly, yes, not so dense, and I would say it is definitely lowering the chance of injury.
All right, so let's talk a little bit more about the Brightpick Giraffe, which is a new storage density solution, and it increases that density by up to 3 times, if I have that correct. So what does that translate into in terms of reduction of labor needs when you've got that automatic storage solution that's going to go and pick from that location? You've got that density. So obviously, our listeners out there probably understand the difference between a manual warehouse and an automated warehouse. Hopefully they've seen an example of both. I know I have. Manual warehouses, you've got a much wider aisle. So you're spending a lot of space on, the ability to move within that facility, whether you need, a forklift, whether you've got a manual pallet jack or anything of that sort. You have to be able to maneuver. Whereas within the automated facilities, and these very highly automated facilities, that robot, whether it's Carl or James or whatever you name it, so that you can make the repair to the right one when it needs it, and differentiate between the various components, those need a much smaller space in order to go up. So that racking aisle is much more condensed, and you're able to fit much more in that square footage, because you have this robot that doesn't need all of that maneuverability. So When we're looking at these and looking at this one specifically, where are we looking in terms of that labor reduction or optimizing how much time humans spend in that area? And is that a genuine ROI, or is it just a trade-off?
Great question. So exactly as you described, it's in principle in development of Giraffe, the kind of the biggest challenge was that we wanted to have still the narrow aisle. Autopicker is 3 meter tall, and the aisle is, I think, 90 centimeters or something like that, 92, 94, depending on the, how flat is the surface actually, the floor, I mean. And here the challenge was that, okay, we want to go to 6 meters. So suddenly you see that the base is compared to how tall is the robot is 1 to 6, more than 1 to 6. So but we were able to still make it. It was not simple, but we were able to make it. And that means those aisles are still very narrow, and I would even say that for humans it's like borderline comfortable. If you can imagine, it's really not much. But there's no motivation for people to be there. It's mostly, this part is kind of fully automated. There's no point for people to be there. So the kind of immediate outcome is that when you are 2 times taller, kind of the area you use is 2 times smaller, and that is of course super difficult with humans. Like either you are building completely new mezzanine, so like another floor, which is usually quite expensive and not exactly modular. People tell it's modular, but usually it's there at least 10 years. Nobody's building mezzanine for 1 year. So and otherwise simply people cannot reach, even 3 meters is already challenging, so and uncomfortable and probably not very secure. 6 meters, it's impossible. So from this viewpoint, we say in some cases we tell that one goal could be that, okay, let's improve efficiency of people. But in some cases you could tell that, okay, it's like, let's build superhuman or how to tell, I want to reach like a giraffe, that's the name, that's the logic. I want to reach so high. So, sometimes we are kidding that we should build cheetah now, to be super fast, and so on. So I think it is really, now when you see all the humanoids and, the entire trend, sometimes people look at the problem like let's be as good as humans and or people, and I'm like, okay, I want to go further. I want to reach higher. I want to be faster. Ultimately, that's yes. It's like let's build superhumans. And Autopicker and Giraffe to some extent. Of course, it has some superhuman capabilities. And I think that's where it's different. It's not you are not replacing labor. You have solution that is simply better than the previous one, and of course the side effect is that you replace some labor, and that, I think that's perfectly fine. Now you have washing machine, you have dishwasher, you have all those machines that are improving your life, and simply that progress. It's interesting that people will never stop. I mean, me definitely not. It's kind of my, like I have to do it. When I see that something could be done better or more efficient, I want to do it, and I think it's perfectly fine. And as we just concluded in the previous topic, it's kind of hand in hand. Like people don't want to have those jobs. We have solution that is solving that problem. Okay, perfect. Let's do it.
Well, no, and you make an excellent point that, as a society, we have automation to do the things that we feel are drudgery. A dishwasher, a washing machine, even a clothes dryer, which is even less prevalent because a lot of people still use, lines to dry their clothing. But we do embrace those opportunities to find the automation that releases us from having to do the work that we don't want to do. And I feel like that's what the statistics and the trends are telling us in terms of warehouse labor, is people aren't wanting to do this particular labor. So it makes sense to have this automated solution. One thing I would question, because we talked about it earlier in terms of a disparity between different regions of the world, different markets. For one thing, in the US, while we do have a 40% turnover labor rate when it comes to warehousing, we also have a ton of space. So for companies looking to place a warehouse or a facility in the US where they're going to manage their distribution, they have square footage available to them at relatively reasonable cost. I mean, there's always a cost, but the cost of going out is typically a lot less than the cost of going up. Now, in other areas of the world, that's not as much of an option. We've got the population density in Europe. We've got the Asian markets where it's super dense. And so, when companies are looking to have a fulfillment center near these largely densely populated areas, they have to make this trade-off. First of all, they know that the people in the cities are not as willing to do this type of labor. And second, land availability is scarce. So going up makes a lot more sense. And enter the giraffe and being able to support that facility's aims and goals. So I think when we talk about the concept of robots taking jobs away from people, what types of things do you talk about with your clients when you're discussing these types of technology implementations? If there is that pushback of, we don't want to take jobs away from people, because that argument has to come up more than once.
Again, going back to the managers I was mentioning, I think in many cases, maybe 5-6 years ago, it was maybe a little different. But today, I would say every single manager I see, or supply chain officer and so on, I would say they are, nobody's really discussing if automation is kind of suitable or efficient. I would say we are probably over that period. And I would say, again, going back to the hiring and training, we were not mentioning that all that training necessary, then again, the guy is not showing up and so on. So I would say it is forcing almost everybody into automation, and it's not, I think, again, maybe 10 years ago, 5 years ago, technologies maybe were not so mature. It was not so clear. Today you can count it probably hundreds of thousands of robots in warehouses. Amazon itself, it's already 1 million, if I remember correctly. It's kind of funny. They are one of the largest manufacturers of robots in the world, Amazon. But if you count all the rest, including us, it is already hundreds of thousands of robots. And simply it's proven. I feel that there's very little arguments against that automation, and even again, maybe 5 years ago, probably common ROI was sometimes maybe even 10 years when it was very complex, big automation, but probably it was suitable for maybe 20 years, so it's okay. Then people started to develop more kind of compact, quickly to deploy solutions, and I think that also, plus like technological components, motors, PLCs, whatever, any of those components, they are cheaper. Lidars, all of that is going down, and that really means that today you can really get, I would say, 3 years is in many cases simple, 2 years is feasible in many cases. Plus you have robotics as a service, which is kind of immediate ROI from some viewpoint. So all of that, I would say, I'm struggling to find, some real arguments. I think still sometimes it's really like IT integration, because it for some reason sometimes companies struggle with that, and maybe still it takes some time and some effort, and I would say there's still some small risk connected to that. I would say it's pretty small. I like, we have very good experience, so I do, but I understand. I understand that someone who never did any automation, he can still see automation as some kind of risk. It's perfectly fine, and that's why we are here. Us, other players in the industry, to convince them. But again, and what I want to tell is that honestly, I haven't heard someone telling me that what we will do. Like there was one case where it was more like let's really talk about ergonomics, how to make it comfortable, and all these. I would say they still deeply care about their employees, that is still perfectly fine. And I would say this is probably something that we should solve also long term, like it should be still very, very human, or how to tell it. It should be, and I mean the collaboration, the kind of that feeling, because we don't want people to be seen as a Skynet, or Terminator, whatever. Something, it should be, ideally it is perceived as okay, this is helping me, it's helping company. It's making that company probably more profitable, so probably my job is maybe even more safe, and so on and so on. I would say we need to create good perception, but I think it's perfectly fine. Over last 5 years, I as I said, I think it's default, and people really are not questioning automation anymore.
Yeah, I think I've seen that as well, where the idea of automation is less controversial in that regard, because it's not so much about the people, although we do want to make sure that people are employed. However, I think one of the things that you just brought up, and it kind of leads into my next question, is how can companies use those robotics as part of a broader labor strategy, so they're not just hiring those entry level unskilled workers, but now they're looking to attract and retain talent that can help move their organization forward toward their own goals. So you were mentioning IT being, an area where a lot of times that could be the sticking point in getting an automated solution, is having the IT infrastructure in place. And this opens up the opportunity for skilled individuals who have these capabilities to be able to come in and work alongside these technologies in order to move the organization further, in their own aims. So what other parts of, or what other areas can people be working alongside these technologies in these facilities that's going to open up the labor market for these companies?
Exactly. That's a great question. I like this one because, in many cases I talk about it, that, I'm really convinced that in the future, one of the top positions, top jobs we will see is robot maintenance, robot technician. Even today we have many of them, and simply it's it's like a manager of robots. If you want to talk in human language, or how to tell it, and partially it's really operational. How to help those robots to solve potentially something that is complicated, or kind of like edge case that they have never seen. This also connected to all the AI. AI is works very well. It's like we do all the picking. There's a lot of things where you can use it, but still, I remember cases where, I don't know, we have seen, it was a box, and usually we are looking for a box with AI, and it worked very well. But sometimes I have seen pictures where the box was flipped and there was a lot of carrot, the green carrot, and yes, AI was a little confused that doesn't look like a box, so then you have to kind of employ someone who is really kind of solving all the edge cases. And exactly as I said, it's a little different, probably, kind of, maybe it's like more value for the employer, more value for the employee. And I think it's seriously, if you take, warehouses, they are well structured, and that is one of the reasons why automation is so strong there. Automotive is historically, very strong, but we will see more and more in potentially, restaurants everywhere, like probably everywhere, and with humanoids even more. But it's still the same, self-driving cars. It's just different type of robot. It's exactly the same. The guys in Google and everywhere, they are solving exactly the same issues as we are, and there's usually, someone behind the scenes, probably kind of managing entire fleet or fleet of fleets, and so on and so on. So there's someone who's helping those robots. Not always, like in many cases, not needed. In many cases, it's simple, but sometimes you have to do it. And I think that is, how to tell, like, if someone would tell me that this would happen, when I was a child, like, yes, robot technician would be potentially one of the top jobs. It's actually pretty cool. I know that is valuable job, and I really hope that it will actually happen, from this viewpoint. And so there's, and it's so operational. Then there's more like spare parts, maintenance, and all these. So that is even more potential technical, and that is also needed. It's still mechanics. It's still electrical things and so on. So there's a lot of things that can over time be replaced. It's like all the predictive maintenance, and you could imagine there's a lot of these. And I think even now it's happening. All the companies, they have such a technicians, and we have them. And again, I think it's pretty cool. And for larger customers, I actually expect that we have those that they are solving these. For smaller customers, we provide that service. So I think from this viewpoint, it is on the operational side and also on the technical side. I think it's creating a lot of, I think, very attractive jobs. You are working with cutting edge technology, and helping building those. You could imagine that now you see Autopicker 2.0. That's how we call it. But fundamentally, it is revision number 8, maybe, or something like that. You could imagine we were improving that over time. So there's still, as I said, it's not only me, it's the entire company and entire industry. Everybody's hunting efficiency. Everybody wants to push that innovation further, and that is also creating, a lot of interesting opportunities. So yeah, as I told, robot technician will be as common as plumber or I don't know, like electrician, in your house. It's the same.
I agree. And I think one of the things that draws an interesting parallel here, if we look back at not necessarily distribution centers, but if we look at production and we look back historically over the last 100 years of what that workforce looked like in a production facility, we had, people, usually men, who were in these facilities, and they were, the engineers or the repair guys or the guys who worked on the machines. And it wasn't robotic, but it was mechanical. And so, they were the ones who were in charge of maintaining this equipment and making sure that it worked throughout, the industrial boom in the 20th or the 19th and 20th centuries. So I think that this is just the next evolution of that, where we're working on a different type of machine. Maybe there's a different skill set needed, but the crux of the matter is still the same, that we still need those individuals to help with industry. It's not a replacement. It's simply a shift in roles a little bit, or a shift in responsibility, that instead of doing the function of the machine, they're maintaining the machine so the machine can do the function and be more efficient at it and safer. Because if the machine is going up and picking up these heavy items, for instance, you were mentioning the size of these pickers, they can pick something that is much larger than a human or even a team of humans could do safely on a repeated basis.
Imagine forklift. It's some kind of robot from some viewpoint. Because you are usually in control. There are also self-driving forklifts, but ultimately it's superhuman. Lifting 2-ton pallet, easily. And yes, there's I think from some viewpoint it's exactly the same as industrial revolution. There's like something that I think we should study is kind of speed of change, because with AI, not so much robotics. Robotics is, I think, let's call it slow enough for now, but I think AI and kind of software improvement, software robots, agents. Those are software robots. I think that could be quite fast. It's not the topic of today's discussions, but I like to talk about it because I feel that what if Microsoft Excel will be suddenly, or people will be suddenly 5 times faster? Do we need all of those people working with Excel spreadsheets? Maybe no, So I think this digital revolution actually could be, because in many cases people talk about robotics and how they are worried about the labor. I would say I wouldn't be worried about that one. That is slow enough from some viewpoint. But here I think it could be pretty quick, and people have to think about it, I think.
Well, I think we have a great outlook on what the labor market is going to be looking like, and how robotics and automation will play a role in that. Let's say that labor availability continues to shrink. We're facing these same issues in the next 5 years. So what role will the auto picker 2.0, the giraffe, play in ensuring resilience and that operational continuity through hills and valleys of that labor shortage, availability, ups and downs? How are businesses going to achieve continuity with this type of technology?
From many viewpoints, you could tell that humans are extremely flexible. The most flexible you can get. That is. With robotics, I think you have to understand the system to some extent. But if you understand it, then you are probably safer and kind of it's just easier to predict, because if you know the system, next time it's doing the same what it did yesterday. There's no surprises, mostly no surprises, and there are features like, for example, we introduced last year, we call it overnight picking. So there are some human pickable items. But okay, we can pick them in the morning, when pickers are coming to the G2P stations. But all the robotic pickable items, in many cases, like we have seen examples where it's 95%. We see examples when it's 65%. Typically, I would say it's, let's say, 75% is robot pickable. We can still run those robots overnight, and you could imagine this is helping you quite a lot. Suddenly you in the morning potentially, let's say, I don't know, 60-70% of the job is done from some viewpoint. You just kind of top all the orders with the human picks. So there's a lot of tricks that, and that is really lights out warehouse. During the night, like there's potentially 0 people. So from this viewpoint, I think this is giving you again some kind of superpower. And as we know, that is very common superpower of robots. Yes, they can work 3 shifts and they are not, kind of pissed, or how to tell it, they are not angry. They are not, they are very happy with it. Of course, there's some weird or something, yes, but still that is very, very small tax you have to pay for having, potentially lights out warehouse over 3 shifts. Yes, that is, I would say still we are not there. You need still someone there. But I think like, again, if you know the tool, you can use it very well, and probably you are it's much safer, and also you mentioned ups and downs. So I think easily what can happen is that for some reason the season is not as good as we expected, and so on. So then this is more like a business innovation, I would call it, all the robotics as a service and all these. But you have sometimes pretty good flexibility. You can tell that, okay, I want to rent additional 10 robots now. You can probably, if you estimate at least somehow well, you can pretty much match your rate. And in principle, anything above the rate, probably you overpaid. So if you are able to exactly match that curve over entire year, let's say, yes, you are saving money. Because probably you can predict, let's say, 3 months period should be okay. You see some trend, and that really means that yes, you are again saving, and kind of your company is more robust. You are not you are paying for the performance you really needed. Probably your EBITDA is slightly better. Great.
Yeah, and I've been in a facility that you're talking about where they've got the picking taking place, the robotic picking taking place at night, and then the workers arrive in the morning, and they've, like you said, 60% of the work is done. All they have to do is finish off the processing of these orders and get them over to whether it's cartonizing or palletizing these orders, getting them sent out, but all of the heavy work is done. And so then you've got the humans for the more dynamic things, the things that need a thinking, breathing person paying attention to this order.
Yep.
Because, I think there's a balance there when it comes to robotics and automation within these types of facilities, is when companies are trying to find a solution to solve whatever problem in their facility. One of the things that they're always trying to do is improve their customer satisfaction. At the bottom of everything is serving their customers better and more efficiently. And sometimes efficiency is not the better solution. Sometimes you need more hands-on human customer service. And I think that this hybrid approach of having robots picking throughout, a third shift or even a second shift when it's more expensive to have humans on site, this is a great way to show how that can balance. You maintain your customer service rigor and having humans, participating in the work that's being done, but you leave a lot of the heavy, repeatable, and non-value add to the technology that's capable of achieving that and freeing up your human capital for the things where humans are truly required.
Just came to my mind, for example, Miebach. With humans, it's very difficult to make sure that you are not sending wrong items to the customers, and again, it's a training and so on and so on. But just again, we are not machines. We do mistakes, and it's natural, when you pick item number 10,000 in the given day. Yes, it's okay to do a mistake. It's perfectly fine. But again, here, we have seen customers who were able to improve these by some combination, and robots, in principle, they do very little systematic mistakes, or how to tell it. They are not going to pick wrong item, but we have seen, things like there are two boxes glued together. So we pick one, the one is below, so you don't even see it. So you actually pick two, so you do double pick. Yes, and then Packer probably can understand, okay, this looks a little suspicious, it's two boxes glued together, so he's checking and probably, fixing that. And ultimately, we have seen that easily people can do 4 to 5 times lower amount of mispicks, which is a big deal if you know all the returns and all the costs related to that. And plus, I would say even probably bigger piece of it is that your customer is not happy, So from this viewpoint, I would say it's obvious choice, like there's no better combination.
So beyond automation, which we've talked about a lot today, what strategies do you see some of these companies using to mitigate the labor challenges over the next 5 to 10 years, besides robotic picking?
That I think is a difficult question, because I would naturally answer that automate even more, but I would say that exactly as we already told it. I think if there's any chance to attract better talent, it will always help that company. Like I'm always telling that there's I'm always telling everybody, like, hire 10 out of 10 people, like that. If you hire 9 out of 10, you are still perfectly fine, but you have to have that very high standard. And I think this is very important also for the future, that technology and AI is going to penetrate more and more. It's super clear, and I think having that talent that can utilize these tools, automation, AI, better WMS, anything connected to these, I think that is what is going to grow those companies, and ultimately it is competitive market. They 3PLs, all of them, like they have to have the best customer service, the fastest possible fulfillment, all of those parameters. It's clear that in 10 years I can easily imagine that you would expect the Amazon in 5 hours. I think it will happen. Probably not the entire portfolio, but I think it will happen probably maybe even 3 hours. And companies will need kind of people who can utilize those tools. And I think I would always recommend this, that it is not so simple to attract the talent, but you have to do anything you can to get the best talent. I would say that is the best guidance, I guess.
Well, I agree. Thank you so much, Jan, for joining us today for this discussion. As labor pressures persist, the future of warehousing will hinge on finding that ideal balance between human talent and intelligent automation. So thank you for showing us how some of these innovations in technology can ease today's workforce challenges while building stronger and more resilient operations for the future. To our listeners, if you found today's episode valuable, be sure to hit the subscribe button so you never miss an episode. And if you're interested in being a guest on our show, you can reach me at podcast@miebach.com at any time. Thanks for listening to Speaking of Supply Chain.